Hello, Video Game Hunter here, and welcome to my review. Back in the mid-90s, my mom used to take me and my brothers to a movie rental store to check out a video game for the weekend. However, only one of us was only allowed to check out a video game, while the other one was only check out a movie, and we would swap turns every Friday. Of course, we didn't care about the movies, we were excited to play that video game for the weekend. And there was one game I remember we used to check out all the time, and that game was Comix Zone. We loved this game very much, but the problem was I could never get past the second stage in this game, because back then I really sucked at video games. But of course, that was then and this is now. So, no further ado, this is Comix Zone on Sega Genesis.
Comix Zone was released really late in the Sega Genesis library, especially in Japan on the Mega Drive, because by the time this game came out, January 1st, 1995, the new system PlayStation and the Sega Saturn was already out in Japan, and by the time this game came out, not very many gamers actually heard about this game. However, the idea for this game actually started out around the year of 1992 when an employee at Sega Technical Institute, Peter Mowerich, made an animated video called Joel Pencil Trapped in Comix Zone, displaying the concept of the game and showing how the comic book elements will work. The story is based around Sketch Turner, a comic book writer slash comic book artist, who was working on his comic book one night. Then suddenly, an evil villain named Mortis comes popping out of Sketch's comic and tells him that he may be just a drawing now, but once he kills Sketch, he will be free and bring chaos to his world. However, he can't kill Sketch in his world, but he can kill Sketch in his comic book. When Sketch arrives in his comic book, he is greeted by General Alyssa Cyan. She pretty much tells him that he is the chosen one, and Sketch has a job to do. She doesn't give out very much detail, but Sketch just accepts his destiny and goes along with it. So, anyway, Comix Zone starts out pretty much like any other beat-em-up games, like Streets of Rage or Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. The reason I say this is because in those games, you pretty much press one button and you defeat the enemies easily. However, later on in the games, your enemies will start blocking more, which makes it a little harder on you to defeat them. So which means you have to be a little more creative. Now, if you own the original manual, it shows you other moves you can do in the game. But if you play this game for a while, you're most likely going to figure out these moves, since they're really not that complicated. The best way I defeat most of these enemies is by pressing the action button a couple of times, then press forward up angle action, which makes him do a high kick, or forward down angle action, which makes him do a low kick. The only thing they don't show you in the manual is the paper airplane. This I strongly don't recommend using. The reason why is because it takes too long to perform, and it hurts you when you're trying to execute it. Even though it does a lot of damage to your enemy, but if you get hit when it comes back, that's 1/3 of health you just lost. Okay, before moving on, let's talk about the enemies. The enemies are actually pretty creative in this game, unlike some other beat-em-up games I played, which were also good games, but not creative with their enemies, because they pretty much use the same concept like street thugs or bad girls with whips. But in this game, there's all kinds of different enemies, like mutants, regular humans, or some strange animals. Some of them you fight throughout the game, and some of them are just there for that part of the stage. Now, you could just go through this game and just try to beat the crap out of the enemies. However, sometimes it's best to use your items you have in the game to defeat them, but I'll talk about that later. When you enter a panel or defeat all the enemies in a panel, sometimes you see Mortis' handwear appear and draw up some more enemies. That's pretty cool. The most memorable enemy I found in this game is that Viking chick. Yeah, she does have a whip, but you guys have to understand. That whip is her braided hair, and she uses it to attack and swing on pages. That's being creative. The levels in the game is probably the best part of the game, because it actually lives up to the name of the game, Comic Zone. Each level you play is like a comic book. Every panel you complete, you'll see a flashing yellow arrow telling you where to go. Go to that direction and sketch will jump to the next panel or climb down a panel. However, in some parts in each level, after completing a certain panel, you will see 2 yellow arrows instead of 1, giving you 2 choices where to go. This is where you really have to be extra careful on, because one panel will lead to a difficult path, while the other one will lead to an easy path. Here's a good example. Instead of going down this time, I'm going left. Oh, bug! The page is on fire! Shoot! What am I supposed to do? Oh, God! Oh, man! You know, now that I'm thinking about it, why didn't just Mortis to set the comic on fire in the first place? This would easily kill Sketch, and this would easily make him gain his freedom. But then again, we wouldn't have a fun game now, would we? Well, anyway, while I'm still on the topic talking about levels, I've been hearing a lot of things about this game either being too easy or being too hard. My opinion on this is that first time players may find this game a little difficult. However, after a while, you'll soon discover some of the obstacles you face is really just take some common sense to get through. And you really just have to know what items you have to use on certain parts of the game. So really, it's just trial and error. And speaking of items, this is really another reason I really like to play this game on. Every item in this game is very useful in certain parts of this game. For example, in this part of the game, I could just wait for this enemy to climb over here and jump and hit him. But instead, I'm just going to throw this grenade at him, which kills him in one hit. Now, there is a lever on the other side of this pool of lava, and I have to activate it to go to the next panel. But to get over there, I have to jump into that lava, which does a lot of damage to my health, but not enough for me to get killed to get to the other side. However, I don't feel like losing my health, so instead, I'm just going to throw this knife and hit that lever over there. See, I just saved myself a ton of health. One item I will mention that is very useful in this game is Sketch Pet Rat Roadkill. Yeah, apparently his rat also got sucked into this comic book too. But Roadkill can go through tight places to flip levels, and it can find hidden items in some parts of the game. It also can fight enemies by shocking them, but not that well. Plus, if he gets hurt too much, he will just fall off the page. So, using him to fight enemies is not a good idea. The last thing I like to talk about are these question marks. There aren't that many of these in the game, but when you do find one, you have to be very careful when you pick them up, because you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, I did say every item in this game is very useful, but you don't always get an item. Sometimes these things will just blow up in your face once you pick them up. So if you're very low on health, I think twice before picking them up. But then again, it could be iced tea, which restores your health. So really, picking these up is a gamble. In case you do die in this game, depending how far you got, depends if you get an extra life or not. Because in the beginning of the game, you only get 1 life. And if you die in the first episode, you don't get to continue on. So, it's game over. The only way you can get an extra life is by completing an episode. Which, by the way, there's only 3 episodes in this game. So the most lives you can get is 3. The controller is pretty well done, either you're using a 3-button controller or a 6-button controller. Because this is one of those games, depending on which controller you're using, affects the setting of the controls. For example, in Mortal Kombat 3, to do a high punch on a 3-button controller, you have to press A and B together, while the 6-button controller is just the X button. So anyway, back to Comix Zone. The difference in controllers is that if you're using a 3-button controller, to select an item you have to press C and keep pressing C until you get to the item you want to use and press A. While the 6-button controller, you select an item by pressing the X and Y and Z button. It's a lot faster than doing the 3-button way. Plus now the C button on the 6-button controller now allows you to block. However, I kinda find this useless because I never find the right time to use it. The music and sound effects are amazing. The music is not something I might listen to on my iPod or anything, but I think it fits well with the game. But the sound? Oh, I love the sound. The blocking, the punching, the smacking, and the character's voice are just plain awesome. Growing up playing this game and just hearing the sound of the game makes me feel so good inside. For example, I love that sound that Assassin makes. It's so very entertaining.
Okay, I know. I've been praising this game throughout this review. So here's my big 2 negatives in this game.
The levels in this game are way too short. I know I did explain the levels and all, but once you figure out what to do in this game, it's actually pretty short. You can probably beat each level less than 6 minutes. It also doesn't help that there's only 6 levels in this game. Now my second complaint, which is my biggest one, is that the bosses in this game are way too easy. There are 3 bosses in this game, and only the second one I thought was a little challenging. However, the other 2 are not that challenging at all. See, I can understand the first boss being easy because he's the first boss, but they made him way too easy. All I have to do is to get to the other side, make sure this creature blows fire, and set this barrel on fire, and push the barrel close enough so it can hurt himself enough to die. Now, the last boss is of course Mortis. You have to defeat him as soon as possible, because he traps Alyssa in this tube, which will start filling up with water. If you take too long to defeat Mortis, she will just drown. However, it won't end the game, but once you defeat Mortis, you will just receive a bad ending. Yeah, it's one of those games. Depending on what you do in the game, depends if you get a good ending or not. However, Mortis is not that hard to defeat like I said earlier. Just get him to teleport close enough to that blaster thing and jump over that ledge over there and start flipping that switch. Keep doing this and he would die eventually.
So, to wrap things up, this is a pretty good game. The music is nice, the sound is amazing, and the gameplay is pretty good. It's just, the levels are kind of short and the bosses are really easy to defeat. But if you got some time to kill, this is the game for you. You can probably pick up this game around for $5 to $10, so it's a pretty good budget game. Well, that's it for today. This is Video Game Hunter, and until next time, goodbye.
The All Around Gamer Production.